So as we look at the travel plan disruption during the Lunar New Year holidays, just how costly will this be for the travel industry as companies have had to cancel people's flights and their trips?
It's going to be very costly for this coronavirus outbreak. For example, in New York, there are tour operators who have been in business almost 40 years, and they have to cease operation because basically tour operators and travel agents, they work on a very small margin, and to be hit for an incident like this, it's tough. It's really tough in New York. And it's not only New York, it's around the world that it's going to affect. It's going to affect the hospitality, the cruise industry, the restaurants, department stores. It's going to be a tough few months.
And a lot of people might not think about this, but it's not just cancelled flights. As you mentioned, the hospitality industry, that's hotels, that's people who work in all these industries as well. Do we have any sort of early estimates about how widespread that domino effect might be?
In New York, we have about 1.1 million visitors a year. Basically, we're number 2 as far as international travelers. Travelers from the UK is about 1.2 million. So you take these numbers into consideration, and then plus the fact that Chinese tourists that do come into New York, they spend on the average of about $3,000 per person. They're the highest spending market for tourism. So that's quite a big hit for New York.
And there have been a lot of comparisons, obviously, to the 2003 SARS outbreak. Just how damaging is this slowdown, though, in travel compared to that slowdown during that epidemic?
It's not only slowdown, I mean, the entire airline industry has practically, well, it is cut off, for China. Whereas during the SARS crisis, I've traveled to Asia, and there was no shutdown of airlines. I mean, each passenger was tested for temperature, but other than that, I went and it came back safe. So we're just being a little overcautious, but they say this is more like a serious case of influenza, and there are more people dying from influenza than from this particular coronavirus outbreak.
And we know that during the Lunar New Year holiday, a lot of people like to travel within China and also within the region as well. How does the impact on Asian countries versus, say, destinations like Europe and the Americas compare?
With the Americas, if the Chinese tourists are not coming into the Americas or New York particularly, it will be affected. Even department stores, when they come into New York, they spend. Department stores will be affected, restaurants will be affected, hotels will be affected, cruise lines, sightseeing tour companies, bus companies, they're all being affected. It's not only the Chinese companies, it's all around. The hotel companies are universal, so they will be affected too.
Now, according to Xinhua and Fitch ratings agency, around 660 million Chinese passengers traveled by air in 2019. Now, that's more than 7 times as many as back in 2003. How reliant has the global tourism industry become on Chinese tourists, especially as the middle class continues to get more and more disposable income?
Well, the projection for the Chinese tourists, the percentage should be increasing this year and next year into 2025. So this will be a temporary interruption, but I guess this virus will be over hopefully soon by April or May, just like an influenza virus. So hopefully it will pick up the airline industry again at that time.
And just quickly, any advice you have for travelers coming to or from China, sort of worried about their travel plans?
Like any other virus, whether it's SARS or whether it's a volcano or whether earthquakes in a particular country, it's just be cautious. And people do wear masks, which help. But for this period of time, I would suggest if you don't need to travel to that particular area, perhaps postpone it until a later time, perhaps maybe in May or June, and then enjoy your trip at that time.